true knowledge comes from a deep reflection inward into your own, let's call it hardware, which is the way you see things, how you see it, through what prisms. The deeper meditating into the deepest precognitive layers of your own mind is what sheds light on, what is really, what observation really is in all of that. So it's out of that I wanted to ruminate a little bit about, from a precognitive perspective, what thinking is and what projection is. And it obviously comes out of an ongoing process of mine of very deep reflecting into the very hardware of myself, let's put it so, because the moment we fall into observing others or anything outside of us as such, we fall into a form of a voyeurism, a zoom-in voyeurism, where we basically just get stuck in looking at the outside of things, even if we put it under a microscope, or even if we put it on in a particle accelerator and try to smash the smallest of the smallest parts together, you just keep getting more of the outside of the shell. But if you move inward into this inner reflection beyond your own hardware, then you really get to understand how things work. And the essential point of today is about projection and what it does. Projection tends to erect a cage around us, of an electromagnetic cage, which we call space and time. And what we then call classically thinking is really, technically speaking, projecting. Thinking is basically a dissociative state where the observer tends to not remain aware that the observer is doing the assuming of things. It becomes something on its own, this thinking thing. The word thinking comes from thinging, things, just like the word cognition comes from cogs. It is a reduction of reality into external things. But from a depth psychological perspective, it means that when we think, we're basically locking ourselves up in a box of causality and locality, while the mind is really behind that, free from that box.
So you often talk about this reality, that people have different realities. People live in different realities, and you refer to them as lockdown, a prison. You have several types of lockdown prisons. Is it another reality, or is it connected to one person?
Well, everybody the lockdown means that you reject the shadow. So if you use education to run away from your feeling of being inadequate, which is what education has become with the grades and the accolades and all of that, then it technically means you're going into a lockdown state, because whenever you reject the opposite in yourself, which we would call the particles of opposite charge, you basically lock the energy down into space and time. So the energetic lockdown, the institutional lockdowns, every one of them are basically ways, education, money, the law, they're basically the pillars that guard and maintain the matrix, which is the energetic lockdown. And thinking is itself a dissociative state, which thus keeps energy in this grid, which is a black and white thing, kind of a grid where we're trapped in a dissociative state. Dissociative as in meaning that the energy, the self, is not in wholeness with itself. So each and every one of the lockdown institutions indeed runs on projection or thinking, which is a way to exclude the observer and the shadow. So health has become a way to not feel the inner symptoms. The symptoms that come up are the shadow, and we cut that off. It's become symptom removal, because when we cut off the shadow, we trap the energy in a cage. This is, of course, everybody speaks about the prison planet and all of that, because at some level they know that we are trapped in a matrix, but they don't know that their own mind is running that matrix for themselves. And as long as you keep in thinking, meaning projecting, you're not aware that you are basically excluding yourself from a thought or a feeling that is really happening inside of yourself, but projecting it outward. So the real work is on the projections to realize this. The real work is not on fighting anything outside of yourself or anything like that. That's the way the controlled opposition wants to keep you in the lockdown, because it's based on seeing out there as real. The real work of retaking the projections and thinking about your thinking and realizing thus that it's a projection, it's a thought, it's not real, that would be the work to get yourself out of this matrix prison. And so thinking would be traded for awareness, because the only thing we can do with projections is what I call inner standing. Because to understand a projection would be like to understand already a product of another dissociative process, because understanding is already a dissociative process, because you're excluding the observer. So then you end up in a scientific view where indeed which is one of the lockdown institutions, where you believe that there is some external reality out there that's real, while this approach would go via understanding the projections. Awareness would be the currency that we have to then sustain, which would hook us up to another grid, a grid that is not limited to space and time. And then we would see that there is not something out there as such as loose from us. That's the big challenge, to realize that there's nothing out there that is independent of us. But then that we are, instead of an observer voyeur, we are creators. That given the state, this is where we reverse the hardware back to its real state, because we are made to believe certain things, which we then go and create. So this is why if I were to convince you that you are always going to be rejected by others, and you believe that you are always going to be rejected, you will manifest that reality in your life. But in the scientific view, you would experience that as some given out there, some fixed truth, reality. So the scientific lockdown has come to the illusion that there is a reality out there, independent of us, and then they try to study that with understanding and thinking, which is the very dissociative process, a projection process, which is what creates the grid, the matrix grid, the prison grid, because then it creates the collapse of the wave into space and time. So we are just energy forms that have been entrapped in a prison box called what we would call the body, and we have forgotten that the self doesn't live in that body, isn't trapped to the the time space material thing, because it's an illusion. In quantum physics we know that it's an illusion. The battle is to see that it's an illusion. But there is thus obviously a big danger that people can get caught in that box and believe it and keep powering it because they believe it. So the biggest effort on the planet is to make people believe in, that the mind and the body is basically the thing, and the mind somehow, is a byproduct of it, running in it, unable to exist without it. So every science all of the core beliefs in science theories are based on keeping people in that energetic lockdown, because that's what the state out of which they are coming is. It's a dissociative state, because they want to study something loose from the observer, while what you are seeing out there will be and is always a product of your state that you are in. You see, this is why we've transitioned into a complete consumeristic society, where people, the consumer is the economic version of the observer in science. It's just a passive recipient of input from the outside, unaware that it is the creator of it.
We're not a blank slate that needs to be colored by products or education. You are.
That's why the education is such a horror. It's basically just filling up the children with projections, limiting beliefs, projections. While if we were to become aware of the projections and move into self-awareness and connect to what we call the self, the core self, which should be something outside of space and time, on the inside of it, that self, the true state would be first awareness, self-awareness, and then unconditionality. Unconditionality would be a state of no thinking, because no cognition, because it is precognitive, it is behind things or thinking, meaning it is not materialistic anymore. We are now, what we see in this world is a manifestation of this materialistic thinking, the product of the thinking, the thinging, or the cognitioning. This is why also condition, it is unconditional means that we would be able to, by remaining aware of our projections, stop projecting. And that takes us into a state of superposition where the true currency is unlimited believe unlimited possibilities, unlimiting possibilities. That's what we should be teaching the kids, that there is access to a miracle mode, not a beast mode or a observer mode, observation. When we really get this, we will realize that the moment we start to observe, we're a voyeur, we're a spy. It's an intrusion on things to observe them from the outside. But we would trade relationship and observation to communion, which would be a deeper communing with the inside of things. The whole thing is a product of this connecting to the surface. This is why science is just studying the surface. Fashion is teaching women how to make up beautiful. It's not teaching them how to become beautiful from the quantum layer up inwardly. We know that the whole glitter and glamour thing is basically a mimicking of the fact that when we connect to the source inside of ourselves, we shine. Now they want to put the shine on them with powder, and it's all a external, outside in disconnection from this inner communion to the source of everything. The Holy Spirit is the source that permeates everything, pervades everything. It's the charge, this juice, the quantum juice, which we have disconnected from. And then caught in that prison, we're trying to pixelate the wave, the right side up wave, by just trying to pixelate what that real wave is, the real shining of the body, because it is directly expressing that inner light. Now has become $1 billion industry of how to make up. The food industry is a mimicking of the fact that the organic food industry is a mimicking of the fact that inside of us we have the potential to be truly organic and natural and unprocessed. It's the self that is that, and then we have made a $1 billion industry out of that. But it's a lockdown because it's cutting off the inner ability to create that natural process in ourselves, the unprocessed self. And so every one of these institutions are a form of lockdown of the energy that is supposed to be free. The very putting of the children in classrooms and filling them up with these external curricula, which are limiting beliefs because there is no theory to grasp the miracle, which is the original state of space and time, of the grid, of the wave. It's just all basically rubbish, because you need to empty your mind from the thinking, and the unconditional state that accesses the miracle mode is no thinking. Then everything gets done by what we know now is the unseen hand of God, which is really a synchronistic flow that is activated in your life to bring you the perfect storyline and purpose. And you do not reach that with thinking. Science is a pixelation of the true wisdom. Hence, obviously, its main product is weaponry and technology, which is basically the mimicking of what the human being is. The human the human being is the real supercomputer, and
I think somehow they do know that it's all about the minds of people, but they're using it exactly in the other way, from the outside.
exactly.
But it's the same thing, but like total opposite outcomes.
That is it. They're trying to make this supercomputer, artificial intelligence, in a machine, while it is what we call the collective unconscious. That's the collective wisdom that is already infused in everything. Everything is alive with that spirit. And this is why with the war on nature and all of that, because the trees are, everything that's alive is full of that wisdom, and they want to now put it in a machine. And the human being was meant to fly and to beat the grid. We have total access already to the super grid. Internet, which is a collective unconscious, which gives us the immediate telepathic connection to everything, deep connectivity. The indigenous, they live in this world. They are one with everything around them already. Our grid is this internet grid is a pixelation of that. We are already hooked up to this Indra's web, which is this super internet, in which the mind is already wired and connected to everything in everywhere. But the effort is to convince people that it's, you're limited by space and time. There is no theory and no university that is based on understanding miracle as the ultimate true form of reality. It's all telling you, it's all based on theories and limiting beliefs.
Well, the mainstream studies, yeah.
But all of it is basically because if they were to say that reality is basically unlimited, you would not be able to understand it, but you could only commune with it. So we wouldn't be, the whole idea of the schools, everything would basically vanish, because now we think, the child has to be made intelligent by pouring into them limiting theories. And then intelligence is then measured on how well you can regurgitate limiting beliefs, which of course are agendas. The human being is about to awaken to a very difficult to digest reality that they have erected around themselves, of basically one big form of mind control and energy control